Hello, and welcome to another U.S. Tech Workers podcast. Today is July 25th, 2019. I am your host, Kevin Lynn, and I am joined by Jessica Vaughan of the Center for Immigration Studies. Jessica, welcome to U.S. Tech Workers.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be with you.
Well, I know you're not a stranger among many of the audience that we have, so I know they're all going to really be anxious to see you and hear you on one of our podcasts.
Well, it's my pleasure. I've had the great privilege to meet and talk with so many of the folks involved on this issue that it's really my pleasure. Great.
Well, I wanted to just talk about one thing today, Jessica. So this will probably be a fairly short podcast, but earlier this week, I received an email from someone, and it was it contained an open letter from a group called Support All of Us, or allofus.org, supallofus.org. And it is a new entrant into this, ending the country caps melee that we've all been involved in. And particularly what we want to do is defeat S-386. But what shocked me about this was an open letter from this organization, and they wanted to outreach to Immigration Voice. And this is the group that has been collecting millions of dollars to lobby for bills like 386 and the country cap, and basically set in stone the displacement of American workers. But what really got me was the people involved in this were involved with an organization that we've been a great partner with in this fight against 386, and that's the multinational coalition headed by Adele Smith. And as soon as this letter came out, Adele dropped all communication with these folks, is no longer associated with them. Now, as I understand it, this group, they've hired a lobbyist by the name of Paul Donnelly, who is somehow associated with Bruce Morrison, to do this outreach. And I'll just read one line from it, which I thought was really interesting, or a paragraph where they go, "A pie doesn't get bigger when anyone gets a larger slice. From 2023 to at least 2029, the rest of the world will get 0 green cards in the advanced degree category, including China, yet it won't eliminate the backlog of 33.5 thousand Chinese now waiting in the EB2, 25K still waiting in 2029. So essentially, they lay that out, but what they want to do is just increase the number of green cards altogether. So it's almost like, forget getting rid of the country caps, we're just going to increase the size of this pie to include everyone. What are your thoughts on this, Jessica? And what would you like to tell our audience about this organization, what they're attempting to do, and this open letter?
Well, this is something to be wary of on so many different levels. For one thing, it confirmed to me that this idea of just ending the limits or dramatically raising the limits on green cards for employment-based purposes was really the end game all along for a lot of the players in this latest episode on the per country caps in particular.
So what you're saying is they showed their hand with
exactly.
this.
And when it finally came down to it, and I don't know if that's by design, like they were always going to wait until the last minute and say, hey, let's pull this rabbit out of the hat and just increase the number of green cards, so because it's something we can all agree on, or whether they just got frustrated with the way things have gone in this so far. I think it's actually always been their plan to try to do that, knowing the people involved. I've known Paul Donnelly, the lobbyist, for a number of years, way back since the Commission on Immigration Reform days in the mid-1990s. And his boss is Bruce Morrison, who invented the visa lottery and has always been agitating as a lobbyist, and before that as a congressman, for more green cards.
Right. Was Bruce Morrison, was he the inventor of the H-1B visa program?
I don't know that for sure. I don't remember. I'm sure that he was involved in it, but I don't know if he was the actual architect of it. It's possible because he was in Congress at that time. But he definitely was involved in the visa lottery, which is just sort of a gratuitous
Right.
program that really doesn't serve the national interest. It just adds green cards. So this has always been his agenda. He's now a hired gun, but of course still believes that we need more green cards. So, now he's showing that card at the, in what hopefully will be the waning days of this debate, although I don't really think so.
Yeah. So, and he's associated then with Paul Donnelly. I guess Paul Donnelly works for his agency.
Right. Paul was one of his staffers on the Hill and also on the Commission on Immigration Reform back in the Jordan Commission, as most people know it.
Oh, right. So this is a guy who should be very well acquainted with the need to restrict immigration and the impact that law of supply and demand has when it comes to displacing American workers.
Well, he is extremely familiar with our immigration system and its effects. But again, he's no longer working for a bipartisan commission with Barbara Jordan as his boss. He's working for special interest groups to try to achieve a special interest agenda, and is looking for any way possible to do that. He probably thought it would be easier to do it without pulling that card of raising green cards, because he probably knew that it wouldn't get through the Senate. But now he thinks that if he can't beat Immigration Voice, he's going to join them, because they too would be perfectly happy, even happier, to have the number of green cards increase dramatically.
Yeah, they all would, because we saw that earlier, Rand Paul objected to the attempt to pass S386 with unanimous consent. His issue was he wanted to see a carve out for Philippine nurses. I guess that was what he was looking for. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, he is concerned that the Fresco bill would basically shut off green card opportunities for nurses because they can't go the H-1B route right now. They're not eligible for H-1Bs. They go directly to green cards.
Ah, I see. Interesting. Well,
they'll be shut out completely because under this plan with no per-country caps, more than 90% of the employment-based green cards, of course, would go to citizens of India. Right,
because they're the ones, that's where the backlog is. And in a prior podcast, I talked to my audience about how this, what happened with the whole dual intent nature of the H-1B visa and how that has led to this backlog. It's crazy. So here we are. It's July 25th. We have about a week before Congress goes into recess. They'll be in recess the whole month of August. Are there do you think, Jessica, they could try to pull another fast one, like another attempt at a unanimous consent? And if they would, is there another senator other than Rand Paul that might come to the aid of the American working professional?
Well, I think that they will leave no stone unturned, no gimmick unused, no tactic untried in their efforts to do this. Leon Fresco, the hired lobbyist for Immigration Voice and for big tech and their Indian contract workers, knows the Senate very well. He will try anything. It's hard to know whether Rand Paul is just a wild card. He's a maverick. It's hard to know whether he's holding out for something specific. If Rand Paul caves, my sources tell me that there is at least one other senator who would be willing to step in and put a block on a unanimous consent attempt to pass this. If it doesn't pass that way, it's hard to see how else it could get done, because there's just not much time left on the calendar. As you pointed out, they're running out of days and hours in which to get things done. On the other hand, it's been passed by the House, so it can always be considered when the Senate comes back in the fall or next year. So I think this risk is with us for a long time unless the Senate were to vote to defeat it. which
Right.
would be the best scenario for those of us who want to see the right thing for US workers and for our immigration system and for the rest applicants from all over the world. Anything can happen. I think that this proposal, because of all of the people calling senators, calling over on the Hill, a lot of people who just weren't educated on this issue have come to have questions about it. Like, why are we doing this way if it's really just a minor technical correction? Why am I hearing from so many people who've been affected by this system? Maybe there's something smelly here that they should take a look at. And I think that the efforts of activists are really paying off on this.
I think they are. I was delivering letters on the Hill trying to educate legislative aides on bills like S386 and the need to better restrict employment visas. And what I was hearing was, it's like, wow, we're finally hearing from the Americans. All we had heard from it sounded like a call center in India is what we were hearing from. But now we're hearing from Americans.
A lot of call center workers.
Yeah. And we have in the past exposed how they're committing fraud. For instance, they'll have their constituents who want to see 386 passed. Basically, they'll know the legislative district, and they'll use Zillow to find an apartment complex. So when they're asked, are you from this district, they go, oh yes, I live at this place. And they go, oh, okay, then they'll listen to them. And you know how with the legislator, they're always going to, they have a sheet of paper, a yes or a no, how people are, what their constituents are calling in on. So, but I think we're very effective in exposing that bit of fraud. And we just have to, for the sounds of it, Jessica, we just have to keep the pressure up. We just have to keep calling.
Right. When lawmakers understand what this bill really will do, that it's not a matter of first come, first serve. Isn't that the American way, as this has been portrayed? When it's explained that this is rewarding a business model that benefits foreign-owned companies, big tech, at the expense of US workers, that it's rewarding a horribly dysfunctional and wrong system, and that the green cards would be monopolized by people from one country for more than 10 years, then they understand it. And it's not a benign technical fix to our immigration system. It would be a profound change that would disadvantage not only American workers, but the global pool of talent that are trying to be legitimate users of our employment-based visas and their employers. So, I mean,
Right.
they get the message when it's explained to them, but we need people to do that and to take the time to talk with them individually so that they understand it.
Right. That's the best advice we can give. We live in a democracy, but people have to exercise their roles and responsibility as citizens in a democracy if they want it to work for them. Because right now, for instance, we attended an event that was really hosted by NASSCOM at the Wilson Center. It was, Jane Harmon, who runs the center, who is a notorious neoliberal globalist, was there with open arms to these lobbyists and these merchants who peddle in, to me, it's human trafficking as a way to displace Americans and make a lot of profit. And after the event, they shuttled them over to the White House and then to the Hill. This is what we're fighting, but we can do it because we have the power of the vote.
That's right. And the voices of Americans who've been affected by this will be stronger than all of these high-paid lobbyists and foreign interests that are lobbying like this. It's a tough project because big tech hired the best. And this is the other aspect of this that's so interesting, is on any other immigration legislation, there would be a slew of reporters from the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, and all of the many news outlets that would cover this. And it's not just that they're off covering the border crisis.
Or the Mueller investigation.
Now, that's a distraction, but still, they would be on top of this. There's only a handful of reporters who are watching this. And I think it's really interesting that the lobbying campaign for Immigration Voice has chosen to go underneath the radar and not generate a lot of attention to their effort. This would be the classic backroom deal if it succeeds. Right. And that ought to be raising all kinds of red flags for lawmakers also. Although, of course, they participate in those kinds of deals all the time. But we should be able to get the attention of enough members of Congress who care about their constituents and about U.S. workers and about maintaining U.S. competitiveness, that they will not let this fly.
I hope so, because it sounds to me, if I can kind of paraphrase what you said, their intent was to pass this off as some benign bill. It's just going to make it, it's more administrative, but so let's just sneak it around. It's not a big deal. But when people call their offices and they tell them the harm that these activities, these actions have done to them in the past and how this will only exacerbate the problem, we can count on the politicians to do something. If nothing else, they're going to push it down the road and consider it more closely. Is that correct?
That's right. This is a bill and a proposal that has never had a hearing, never been considered by any committee.
Never had, that's right, because it's just been sitting in the Judiciary Committee. You would have to have thought a bill like this would have been referred to other committees to look at the economic impact, perhaps the Labor Committee, places where it's having an impact other than Judiciary.
Or at least have a hearing. A right. Hearing would be helpful. But they thought it would be better if they do this out of public view and without anyone hearing any other arguments against it and exposing what this is really about and who is behind this. Yes. This is not about just the Indian contract workers. They're the public face of this effort. But you have to think about who is paying for this. There's no way that big tech is investing these millions of dollars that they are paying for this effort just for the good of their workers. It's for their good.
Right. That's a great way to frame it. And well, as the Chinese curse goes, may you live in interesting times. And these are certainly interesting times. And Jessica, I know you have a hard stop around 2 in a few minutes. Is there anything else that you would like to leave our audience with?
Well, I think that I would just like to thank everyone for all of the work that they've put into this. It is not in vain. They are starting to hear you, but we need to keep it up to get through these last few days to raise awareness of this bill and help people understand that this really is something that would do great harm to American workers, to the future generation of potential American tech workers, and many other occupations like accounting and nursing and Absolutely. Teachers and so on, and to keep it up because they're starting to hear you. And again, we just need to make them a little bit afraid to give their vote away so freely without a discussion on this.
Wonderful. Well, Jessica, I want to thank you for joining us today, but also thank you for all the great work that you, the Center for Immigration Studies does on this topic. Your thought pieces, I know they're widely circulated, widely read, and that's really the ammunition. Our tech workers and groups from groups like the American Workers Coalition, Adele Smith, her multinational coalition, Protect U.S. Workers, and many others, the Programmers Guild, that you're providing them the ammunition they need to sustain themselves in this fight and eventually win. So thank you for all that.
It's my great pleasure and honor to work with you all on this.
All right, thanks so much. And to our audience, hey, if you enjoyed this video today, please give us a thumbs up, because that really helps with the algorithm and getting our message out there even more widely. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our channel. Check out our website at ustechworkers.com. throw us a few shekels. That always helps us continue the fight and sustain our movement. Thanks so much and have a great day.